My family ignored me for years while spoiling my sister. But when they stole the $50,000 my grandparents left me for college, I sued them, and they had to sell everything my sister owned to pay me back. I'm 20 years old, studying architecture at university, and it's been like 6 months since I've spoken to my parents or my younger sister, Vanessa. People always ask me how it's possible for a family to fall apart like this. But the truth is, my family had been falling apart for years. Or rather, my parents had been destroying me for years while they built an altar for my sister. What happened with my college money was just the straw that broke the camel's back. You know? The moment when I finally said enough and stopped pretending that someday things were going to change. I guess I should start at the beginning, although it's hard to know exactly where that beginning is. Vanessa is 18 now, so she's 2 years younger than me, and since she was born, she basically became the center of the family universe. I'm not exaggerating. Literally everything revolved around her. When we were kids, I thought it was normal. You know what I mean? Like, she was the baby of the family, so obviously it needed more attention. But the thing is that dynamic never changed. When Vanessa turned 5 and I was 7, it was still her getting all the Christmas presents while I got like 2 generic things. When she turned 10 and I was 12, my parents threw her this huge party with clowns and a bounce house. And when it was my birthday that year, they didn't even remember until the day after. Things got worse when we hit our teenage years. Vanessa was, I don't know how to say this without sounding bitter, but she was spoiled to ridiculous levels. She wanted a new iPhone every year, and she got it. She wanted designer clothes, and my parents took her shopping every weekend. Me, meanwhile, I wore hand-me-downs from my cousin and had a phone I'd bought myself with money. I earned babysitting on weekends. And the worst part wasn't even that, but that every time something went wrong in the house, it was automatically my fault. Dirty dishes in the sink, Nicole's fault. Vanessa got bad grades. Obviously, it was because I wasn't helping her enough with homework. The cable bill went up because Vanessa kept buying movies. Well, clearly, I should have been more responsible and supervised her better. When I was like 14, there was an incident that basically defined what the next years of my life were going to be like. Vanessa, who was 12 at the time, took my mom's credit card without permission and bought herself like $800 in clothes online. When the statement came, my parents went crazy, and Vanessa, with that angel face she always put on, told them it was me, that I had taken the card and made the purchases. I tried to defend myself, showed them that the clothes that arrived weren't even my size, that everything was in Vanessa's closet, but my parents didn't believe me. My dad yelled at me for like an hour about responsibility and trust. My mom cried, saying, "How could I do that to them?" And I just stood there thinking, if this was really happening, or if I was in some surreal nightmare. Things got so bad that I stopped feeling like part of the family. I'd come home from school and lock myself in my room. I ate alone. I did my homework alone. I basically existed in that house like a ghost, paying constant emotional rent. And what saved me, literally what saved me from going crazy or something worse, were my grandparents. My grandpa, my mom's dad, was an incredible man who since I was little told me I was special, that I was going to do great things. He saw what was happening in my house and he'd tell me, "Nicole, you don't deserve this. Someday you're going to get out of there and you're going to be happy." My grandma was the same. She'd hug me and tell me she loved me, and that no matter what my parents said, I was worth a lot. When I was 16, things really exploded. It was about the credit card thing again, but this time it was worse. Vanessa had used my dad's card to buy herself, I don't know, like $2,000 in makeup and clothes. And again, she blamed me. But this time, I was fed up, like completely done with all that shit. And I yelled at them that they were blind, that Vanessa was a manipulative liar, and that I couldn't take it anymore. My mom told me I was ungrateful. My dad told me if I didn't like how things were in his house, I could leave. And I literally told him, "You know what? Perfect. I'm leaving." I called my grandpa crying, and he arrived in less than half an hour. He picked up my stuff. Well, the few things I had, because honestly, it wasn't much, and took me to his house. My parents didn't even try to stop me. Vanessa was in her room trying on her new clothes like nothing was happening. And just like that, at 16, I went to live with my grandparents, and it was the best decision of my life. For the first time in years, I felt seen. You know what I mean? I felt like a real person who mattered. I lived with them the last 2 years of high school, and they were the best years of my teenage life. My grandpa would take me to see historic buildings because he knew I loved architecture. My grandma taught me to cook and told me stories about when my mom was young, before she became what she is now. I got good grades, got accepted to a decent university to study architecture, and for the first time in my life, I had hope that things were going to be okay. My parents barely called me, maybe once a month to ask how I was, but you could tell it was more out of obligation than real interest. Vanessa never called me even once. And then the worst thing happened. My senior year of high school, in November, my grandpa had a massive heart attack and died. Just like that, suddenly, without warning. One day he was fine, and the next he was gone. It was devastating. Like, I don't have words to describe how empty I felt. And then, like 3 months later, in February, my grandma died too. The doctor said it was her heart, but I know it was because she didn't want to live without my grandpa. She basically died of sadness. They left me, their house, which was a small but nice house in a quiet neighborhood, and they also left me a fund for college. My grandpa had been saving for me since I was born, and with life insurance and other savings, the fund had like $55,000. It was enough to pay for my entire college, maybe even grad school. When the lawyer gave me the papers, I cried, not just because I was grateful, but because it was proof that someone in my family had really loved me and believed in me. My parents came to my grandparents' funeral, of course, and my mom even cried, but I don't know, it felt fake. After the funeral, my dad asked me if I was going to sell the house, and I told him no, that I was going to live there while I went to the local university. He looked at me weird but didn't say anything. He didn't mention anything about the money, and neither did I, because honestly I didn't want to have that conversation with them. I started college that fall, and the first year was amazing. I paid my tuition from the fund, bought my books, enrolled in all the classes I needed for my architecture degree. I lived in my grandparents' house and worked part-time at a coffee shop to pay my personal expenses. I was doing well, had friends, my professors said I had talent. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was building something real, you know? Like I was finally on the right path. And then came the summer before my second year. I went to the bank to withdraw money to pay for next semester's tuition, and when I checked the fund account balance, I almost had a heart attack. Instead of the like $45,000 that should have been left after paying for the first year, there was only $5,000. I thought there was an error, that maybe I was seeing the screen wrong or something, but no. I asked them to print me a detailed statement, and there it was, black and white. 3 massive withdrawals in the last 8 months. One for $20,000 in October, another for $15,000 in December, and another for $15,000 in March. I started shaking right there in the bank. The employee asked me if I was okay, and I couldn't even speak. Who the hell had taken my money? The fund was in my name, but my grandpa had put my mom as co-holder when he created it. Years ago, I guess so she could manage the money if something happened to me when I was a minor. But I was already of age. I was already 19. That money was legally mine. I drove straight to my parents' house. I didn't call, didn't give warning, just showed up and knocked on the door like crazy. My mom opened and was surprised to see me because I almost never went over there. I asked her directly, "Did you take money from my college fund?" And she, without even blinking, told me yes, that they had needed the money for something important. I said, "Important? What could be so important that it justifies stealing $50,000 from me?" And she told me it wasn't stealing, that technically she was on the account so she had the right to use it, and that besides I should be grateful for everything they'd done for me. My dad arrived at that moment, and when I told him what was happening, he also acted like it was the most normal thing in the world. He told me they'd used the money for Vanessa's Sweet 16 party, which had been in October, the $20,000 withdrawal, to buy her a new car, the $15,000 withdrawal in December, and to take her on vacation to Europe in spring, the other $15,000 in March. I just stood there processing what I'd just heard. Are you telling me you spent the money my grandpa saved for 20 years for my education on a fucking birthday party and a vacation for Vanessa? My mom got defensive and told me that Vanessa was also their daughter and that she deserved to have special moments, that not everything could be for me. I yelled at her that literally everything had been for Vanessa my whole life, that I had never had parties or cars or vacations, and that the only thing I'd had was that fund that they hadn't even created, but my grandpa had. My dad told me I was being dramatic, that I still had $5,000 left, and that with that and a student loan I could finish my degree. I told them they were crazy, that $5,000 wasn't enough for even one more semester, that I had 3 more years of college ahead of me. Vanessa came down the stairs at that moment with her fucking princess face and told me, "Oh, Nicole, why do you always have to ruin everything? My sweet 16 party was the best day of my life, and now you're making me feel bad about it." I looked at her and felt a hatred I'd never felt before, like a visceral hatred burning inside me. I told her, "You know what, Vanessa? I hope you enjoyed every second of that party and that vacation because they're going to cost you much more than you think." She looked at me confused, and I left that house knowing exactly what I was going to do. I hired a lawyer the next day. I explained the whole situation, and he told me I had a solid case because the money had been left specifically for my education, and although my mom was technically on the account as co-holder, using the money for something other than my education could be considered misappropriation of trust funds or something legal like that. I honestly didn't fully understand, but that sounded good. I told him to do whatever he had to do to get my money back. My parents received the legal papers like a week later, and that's when they really went hysterical. My dad called me screaming about how dare I sue them, that they were my parents and that I was ungrateful and didn't value everything they'd done for me. I said, "What exactly have you done for me? Blame me for everything for years? Ignore me? Steal my college money? Because if that's what you call doing something for me, I'd rather you don't do anything else." And I hung up. The extended family found out, obviously, because my parents made sure to tell everyone their version of the story, where I was the evil daughter who was destroying the family over money. I got calls from aunts, uncles, and cousins telling me I was exaggerating, that family resolves things privately, that I was embarrassing my parents. I blocked almost everyone. The only ones who supported me were a couple of cousins who had always seen how they treated me and who told me to do what I had to do. The legal process was long and exhausting. It was like 4 months of lawyers and papers and hearings. My parents tried to argue that the money was the family's and that they had the right to use it for any daughter, not just me. But my lawyer presented my grandpa's will where it said specifically that the fund was for Nicole's education, meaning me, and that made it very clear it couldn't be used for anything else. He also presented evidence that I was already of legal age when the withdrawals were made, and that therefore my parents had no legal reason to touch that money without my consent. In the end, after months of fighting, the judge ruled in my favor. He ordered my parents to return the $50,000 plus interest and legal costs, which in total was like $58,000. My parents didn't have that money in cash, obviously, because they'd spent it on Vanessa, so they had to sell Vanessa's car, plus a bunch of expensive jewelry and electronics they'd also bought her. Vanessa cried and screamed and sent me messages saying she hated me, that I'd ruined her life, that I was the worst sister in the world. I deleted all her messages without reading them completely. When I finally received the money, the first thing I felt was enormous relief. You know? Like finally there was some justice in the world. But I also felt empty. Because by doing this, I'd basically confirmed that I no longer had a family. My parents made it clear they wanted nothing to do with me. My mom sent me one last message saying that to her, I was dead, that she didn't have a daughter named Nicole. Vanessa blocked me on all social media, and I, honestly, felt liberated, more than sad. I paid for my second year, of college with that money, and now I'm in my third year. I work at an architecture firm as an intern, and it's going really well. I live alone in my grandparents' house, and although sometimes it's lonely, I prefer 1,000 times to be alone than to be with people who make me feel invisible. I have good friends. I have a life. I'm building myself. I have goals and dreams that don't depend on anyone else's approval. The funny thing, or maybe not so funny but rather ironic, is that like 2 months ago my dad sent me a message. It was the first one in almost a year. He was telling me they needed help, that Vanessa had started college, but they couldn't pay for everything for her like before, if I could help with some money for her books or tuition. I laughed, literally laughed out loud when I read that. I answered with a simple no thanks, and blocked him. I found out from a cousin that Vanessa had to get a job at a coffee shop to pay her expenses, that my parents can't maintain the lifestyle they gave her before because they spent everything on that ridiculous party and that vacation, and that she's furious because now she has to work like a normal person. I'm not going to lie and say I didn't feel satisfaction knowing that, because I did. Maybe that makes me a bad person. I don't know. But after years of being treated like trash while she was treated like a princess, seeing that she finally has to face reality feels like poetic justice. Do I regret suing my parents? No, not at all. That money was mine. It was the only real gift my grandpa could give me. It was his way of making sure I had a chance to get ahead despite everything. And my parents stole it without thinking twice to spoil their favorite daughter even more. They had no right, morally or legally, and I did what I had to do to recover what was mine. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if things had been different. If my parents had loved me as much as they loved Vanessa. If I'd grown up feeling valued instead of being the scapegoat for everything. But then I realized that all of that made me who I am now. I'm stronger, more independent, more determined. I don't need anyone's approval to know I'm worth something, and I have a life ahead of me that I'm going to build exactly how I want, without guilt and without looking back. Last week, I found an old photo of my grandparents in a drawer. They were smiling, hugging, happy. I put it in a frame on my desk, and every time I see it, I remember that they believed in me when no one else did. And that, at the end of the day, is what matters. Not the family you're born with, but the family that chooses you and truly loves you. My grandparents were my real family, and their legacy wasn't just that money they left me, but the lesson that I deserve to be loved and respected, and that I should never accept anything less than that from anyone.